QuaranJazz. Listen while you're home. Hello and welcome to QuaranJazz, your weekly update on what's happening on the jazz scene during the year of 2020. I'm Geisa Fernandes, singer, songwriter, and music researcher from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and your favorite podcast is about to start. And remember, if you are a jazz musician and would like to tell your story here in QuaranJazz, drop me a line. You will find all the ways to contact me in the description of this episode. There's a link to my website, geisafernandes.com. A link to my mailing list is also there for those who became a fan of the show and would like to get news about similar content. And if you are more the social network kind, you can find me on Facebook. The group is called The Touring Jazz Musician, based on a guide that I wrote in order to inform jazz musicians about festivals that accept submissions directly from artists. If this is your thing, join the discussion, The Touring Jazz Musician, on Facebook. But if you're here for the music, I will not disappoint you. Check out the new track added to our QuaranJazz playlist on Spotify. No talk, all jazz. Spotify. No talk, all jazz. You just got a taste from living New Zealand, from my guest this week in QuaranJazz. Saxophone, flute and clarinet player, composer and educator, Jordan Ferrin. Jordan is originally from Los Angeles, California. But if you think that the expression a citizen of the world is kind of overused and became a cliche, well, after you listen to Jordan's stories as a cruise ship musician, you have to admit that the guy is indeed a citizen of the world. Hi, Jordan. Thank you very much for being with us here in QuaranJazz. First of all, I would like you to introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them a little bit about your past, your musical past, your influences, and, well, how did it all start?
Well, hi. My name is Jordan Ferrin, and I have kind of been all over the place in the last 8 years of my life or so. And because of that, I'm kind of am the musician I am today. It's been a long life transforming journey, and I wouldn't trade that experience in for anything, really. I traveled the world as a cruise ship musician, and there are things that words can't describe. And to sum up all of the experiences that I've had in the world, I cannot do that with words, which is why I'm trying to do it with music. But even music, as beautiful as it can be and as meaningful as it can be, it even struggles to capture some of the things that I've experienced. But I do my best. I do my best to try to bring that out in all of my compositions of the last decade or so. So my music is very, let's say, all-purpose, or there's many different sides and facets to my music. It draws from a little bit of everything, really. As a kid, I grew up on classic rock. My folks were always listening to Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, and all these different bands. And then I started getting into jazz when I was about 13 or 14. And then I was still listening to the rock music of the early 2000s at that point. And I started getting into classical music as well. And just there are many different things that I brought with me already to my first ship contract. And then from there, inspiration seemed endless. Totally endless. And I did the best I could with the skills that I had to write music about these experiences that I've had. And so it was interesting too, because interesting in a good and bad way. The good way was, in those 4 years, I would literally have day by day new experiences in different places, and I had all day to go out and explore. And then from wherever I was, from Singapore to Hong Kong to Bali to the fjords of Norway to Nice to Stockholm to New Zealand, would come back on the ship and work in the evenings. So it was a lot. It was so much to take in that sometimes I just couldn't get to actually write a lot of stuff down. But those things that I did write down, I'm very happy for. Even just the little notes that I took, and some of those notes turned into full compositions. A lot of those other notes are still floating around in my head years later. You'll hear anything and everything in my music, but the biggest message of it is to impart some of that beauty that I've experienced to audiences. And that's kind of my mission. I want people to feel something of what I felt, even though they couldn't have been there to experience what I felt. I at least want to, give an experience for them personally through my own experiences and travel, which has fed into my music. And now the two are linked, like life is linked to music. They're all linked together with a bond that cannot be broken. And the biggest part of what I want to do, especially in live shows, is actually tell the stories about each composition, because so many of my compositions do have a story about a specific day and a specific, inspiration and feeling from that day, whether it be in Dubai or Stavanger, Norway, or wherever. I'll tell the story to my audience, and then I'll have the music add to and finish the story. That's the reason behind the band name of the Story Band, and that's kind of what I want to push going forward in these coming years.
Wow, you've really been everywhere, Jordan. And back then in March, when the pandemic started and the COVID crisis exploded, where were you? And what were you doing back then? And where are you based now?
So I, as of September 2018, had been based in London, London, UK, after a year of absolute certainty that I belonged in Europe. Yeah, I spent a year in Southern California, my home, where my family is, and still said, you know what? I still think I want to live in Europe. Even though Southern California is, got some of the greatest weather on the planet, some of the coolest culture on the planet. The music scene here is amazing, of course, and it's been growing so much and so wonderfully in recent years. But I traveled the world for 4 years. And I had to live somewhere else. Going from port to port, day by day, you only get a surface glimpse, really, of certain places, especially if you only are there for a few hours and stuck to the touristy areas. I needed to live somewhere, and London ended up being that place, halfway across the world, and I decided to make it easy on myself in order to get into the country, so I decided to get a student visa to get my master's degree. So things were good at the start of 2020, though. It was in my second year. I was preparing to start writing my big old thesis dissertation paper, and I was starting to book regular gigs too. I had at least 2-3 gigs that were lined up in March and April. I did one gig in March. Then 2 weeks later, my next gig was canceled. And a few days after that, the country announced lockdown. And there I was in my little flat by myself. And, it was a shock, as it was to everyone who experienced that first, the country's actually wherever anyone was, whichever country you were in, there's the lockdown. Okay, just like that, snap your fingers and your life is changed drastically. And I just, I dealt with it best I could. Fortunately, it wasn't too bad. Weirdly enough, I had a lot of time to myself to do my schoolwork and practice for my final kind of recital that the school was still figuring out how to do for like video submissions and the like, because of course nobody could do live performances at the end of the year. And so it was nice for a while, and then of course having to deal with lack of canned goods and toilet paper and just general fear of the uncertainty was a bit foreboding. It was a bit intimidating to be in that kind of an atmosphere, but everybody was feeling that to some extent. Everybody, I guess. And that's, in that case, I guess I'm glad I kind of like to keep to myself a lot of the time. I need a lot of time to recharge, and being alone, I like my alone time. So, but even then, I mean, we're social creatures. We want to get out, and weeks went by, and I felt that loneliness for sure. The projects, my story band projects, totally put on hold. The couple of other things that were panning out and then kind of fizzled out before the pandemic, those were obviously gone. And the little bit of teaching and work I had was getting reduced. And yeah, it was a bit nuts. But I ended up finishing the year. I ended up making huge life decisions that stretched me out more than did the degree. Can you imagine that? So, and now I'm back in California. I am back in California. Those life decisions pulled through. I flew back on August 18th, 2020. And then with the great help of family and friends, I'm in the place I need to be. And the place I need to be is with family during this really uncertain and heavy time.
We all had to reset our priorities back then. But it must have been a tremendously hard decision for you to make, Jordan. Totally understand that. So your quarantine first phase, let's put it this way, was in London, right? So how was your lockdown experience there? And going back to California, what are the current restrictions concerning social distancing and all in California?
During the quarantine in London, like I said, it was just kind of, keeping a good practice routine, keeping busy, with schoolwork, and if done at the end of the day, keeping busy on or distracted with TV shows or what have you. But it was a good, in a way, again, it was a good time to also stand back and reflect on what I was doing and where I was going. And of course, to do that during a pandemic when the future is so uncertain for us all, that could be hard to plan ahead very far into the future. But the lockdown proceeded far into July in London, and I kept having hope and setting little goals for myself, especially as far as finishing my degree. And it all worked out. It all worked out. And having come back to California, Los Angeles, California, the same remains kind of true. I'm going to continue to make little goals for myself. Now, not dictated by school, but by my own career path. I'm thinking about putting together 2 or 3 solo sax videos of myself. Perhaps or recordings of myself. Perhaps I'll release them as singles. I'm not too sure, but it's a little project I've had in my mind for quite a few years now that I'm starting to get finally. I'm finally starting to get a little bit good at it, I guess. It's hard to play a cappella with yourself, especially the way I'm going to be doing it. But so this is a project that is I can totally do it by myself, and I'm going to hope people really take to it. And it's very slowly in California starting to get better. Things are opening up, the scene is kind of opening up slowly like a flower that's been waiting to bloom, and hopefully everything can start falling into place a little more with my old friends and contacts here who like me and what I do. And already that's happened with some teaching work. I came to California set up with a little bit of teaching work and with an old friend, under an old friend, and I'm very grateful for that. I do feel quite hopeful, not just for the immediate present, but for the future as well. It's still bad, obviously, here in the United States, and California, as of now, still has the highest number of cases in the country, and LA County, where I'm living, has by far the highest number of cases of all counties in California. So it's It's a bit scary. Still, humans are resilient, and with that resilience comes, motivation and determination. And I am, determined to adapt to this new world as an artist can, because we've always been adapting, right? To changes in technology and changes in the world, and we always find a way to express ourselves.
All right. So, Jordan, we had the pleasure of listening part of your beautiful tune, Living New Zealand. That's also, of course, in our QuaranJazz playlist. So tell us, what's the story behind this track? And I would love to know your thoughts also on the one that you've selected for us to enjoy at the end of this episode.
Travel is something that will change your approach to life in general, and sometimes, nay I say often, it can be completely life-altering. And equally as impactful can be the departure from a particular place that you were experiencing and seeing. I left Wellington, New Zealand for the last time in February 2016, and I was sort of devastated in a way. All of those memories were the only thing now that kept me held on to New Zealand, and I didn't know when I would return. It's music like this that can really draw in the listener if they're paying attention seriously and can understand the message behind what I'm trying to do. Thinner orchestration, there's intimacy, there's a raw, exposed melody, and all of that can go anywhere. The road for something like that is set up, and the road can go anywhere. Leaving New Zealand was a piece that I wanted to grow into something absolutely tremendous. It's something that speaks to the deepest part of my numerous emotions about New Zealand, and thinking about everything that I experienced in that utterly gorgeous place, everywhere from the unending beaches of Napier to the really beautiful Shire-like waterways and hills of Picton, to the actual Shire, which I was lucky enough to visit, to the Southern Alps, a drive through the Southern Alps and through green rolling mass of earth and sky, and it was, this is how I captured all of those memories, by growing from something intimate into something epic and all embracing. That epic feeling is just as much part of my memories of New Zealand as are the really intimate and beautiful parts. So leaving it was extremely sad in a way, but also extremely, I left it with this epic feeling of absolute gratitude and awe. The awe was also a part of the epic feelings, and just the memory of absolute natural glory. That was my ultimate aim for the most bombastic parts of this piece.
And what about the second track?
So this track that you're going to be hearing is a piece that I started writing about 6 years ago, writing out ideas. This tune is about a day in Istanbul that took my breath away more than the other times that I've been in Istanbul. I was lucky enough to visit there a few times, and most of the times it was sunny, beautiful, chaotic, and the history sits in the air with a great reverence and profound presence, and you can't help but think like, oh, this was Byzantium, oh, this was also Constantinople, my goodness. Here I am, centuries and centuries of history just in the air. And Istanbul really felt that way on one particular autumn day where it was a bit, the sky was definitely like iron in the sense of just heavy gray clouds, and it was raining from time to time. The wind was quite strong, but the trees were all golden. It was autumn, and I wasn't expecting to really fall in love with that city on a cloudy, rainy, blustery day, but I really did. I had been before, and returning to Istanbul on a day like this was something out of this world. And a lot of that had to do with kind of the music I was listening to. I was making a habit of taking my iPod out and letting the music and the places inspire me at the same time, and having them feed off of each other. And at the time I was listening to a lot of Tigran, a lot of Pat Metheny, Ben Allison, who's a great New York bassist and composer who's played with some heavy guys and who has a really distinct style, and John Hollenbeck, who is a composer and drummer who taught in Berlin for a long time and is now, I believe, teaching in Canada. His music is very influenced by minimalism and serialism, turn of the 20th century techniques, but it's all jazz as well. These were the colorful palettes from which I was drawing. All these artists I was listening to, they can be very different music in the jazz world, but I loved it all, and it was that music that just sat with me for months after that day of exploration, and just sheer beauty of the mosques, and especially of Sultanahmet Square, where the Blue Mosque and the Hagia Sophia stand to this day, both of which have indescribable history attached to them. And so this piece is long. It's one of my long form pieces. Maybe on stage I'll elaborate a little less, but I'll definitely talk about this day, describe the day, put people kind of in my shoes, and then we start to play the music. And this music is kind of an experiment. It's sort of through composed in the sense that I wanted to capture the just craziness of the city and the cars and the people walking around when I first got off the ship. It was mad, as they say in the UK. Crazy, as they say in the US, I wanted to capture the chaos of like that first hour trying to get to the Sultanahmet Square through the city. It's quite chaotic. The music leaps and bounds everywhere, and then there are quite a few energetic moments before a die down, where the melody becomes completely new material. And what I actually did was I had transcribed a call to prayer the first time I was there. And while I understand that a call to prayer isn't necessarily considered music in Islam, I found it just so enchanting and hypnotizing, and I just had to pay tribute to it somehow in music, which is the only medium in which I can understand it, if you know what I'm saying. As a person who was kind of experiencing calls to prayer for the first time, day in and day out, and I understand that it might be disrespectful, but at the same time, it's authentically me, and the inspiration that was drawn from it was authentically that call to prayer. And it's like a meeting of the two worlds, trying to understand each other in a way. And I still wanted to, in my difference and naivety, respect that moment of beauty that was coming to me. And from there, finally, we get to the solo section, and the music is supposed to be kind of like I'm in Sultan Ahmet Square, taking it all in. And then we go back to the ship through the craziness of the city. And again, the music goes into this weird territory, kind of a through composition thing. We finally get back to the head of the whole tune long after it's departed from its original journey. So it's basically like craziness of the city to get to these amazing historical places where I feel, transcendental. And then from that feeling, we go back through the city and it's all crazy again, and the music picks up and is like darting back and forth. So that's kind of what I had in mind for this piece. I call this Autumn in Istanbul, and I truly hope you get something from this piece, even though it's going to be different from what I understand. I want you to take something from it that's your own experience, based out of my experience, if you know what I mean.
Well, thank you very much for your participation, Jordan. And congratulations for, despite of all unexpected events, completing the year and getting your master's degree. It was really a pleasure having you here in QuaranJazz. Thank you. And this was the 28th episode of QuaranJazz. Thank you, dear listener, for staying with us. I'm Geisa Fernandes, singer, songwriter, and music researcher from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and we will be back next week with more updates from the world of jazz during this crazy year of 2020. QuaranJazz is above all about stories, so if you'd like to share yours here on the show, drop me a line. You will find the link to my webpage, geisafernandes.com, on the description of this episode, as well as a link to my mailing list. Or you can also join the Touring Jazz Musician, the group that I've created and manage on Facebook. QuaranJazz is also a proud participant of the Social Distancing Festival, an amazing act show back then at the beginning of the pandemic, putting together many different forms of artistic expressions. Definitely worth visiting. So again, thank you very much for staying with us. Till next week. And now, ladies and gents, Autumn in Istanbul.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
QuaranJazz. Listen while you're home. QuaranJazz, a podcast by Geisa Fernandes.